Na 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 Batman. The NES had 3 Batman games. 2 were developed and published by Sunsoft and were side-scrolling action platformers. The first, Batman the video game, was based on Tim Burton's Batman the movie of 1989, starring Michael Keaton as Batman and Jack Nicholson as the Joker. Sunsoft's 1991 follow-up, Batman Return of the Joker, was not tied to any film, but was loosely based on the modern Batman comics of the time. After the theatrical release of the movie Batman Returns in summer of '92, Konami took over the development and publishing of the NES and SNES versions of the game tie-in and transformed the games from challenging platformers into a side-scrolling beat-em-up. Let's have a look.
It's here. Batman, the video game. From Sunsoft. For the Nintendo Entertainment System. Let the battle begin.
In Sunsoft's 1989 Batman the video game, you strut around the screen as the Caped Crusader, dispatching bad guys with 4 different weapons: the Batarang, the Bat Disc, the Bat Spear Gun, and your Bat Fist. You pick up ammo as you go, which maxes out at 99. Using a Batarang uses 1 ammo, the Spear Gun 2, and the Disc 3. Obviously, the Fist doesn't use ammo. You can also pick up hearts for more health and Bs for bonus points, which no one has ever cared about. You make your way through 5 stages, fighting 5 bosses before eventually getting to the Joker. You'll face off against classic Batman foes like Killer Moth, the Electrocutioner, Firebug, and of course, Machine Intelligence and the ruthless Dual Container Alarm. Yes, all the classic villains are here. The bosses are tough and take some practice. You respawn at the boss should you die, but if you lose all your lives, you're starting the whole stage over. The stages are tough too, and require you to be on top of switching your weapons quickly, have good placement, and be adept at wall jumping. For some enemies, like these on the ground, you'll want to punch, as they'll travel through your shots and hit you, causing you to stagger backward. For these guys who pounce on you, you'll want to keep your distance and use the disc if possible. By the way, these guys have to be among the most obnoxious enemies in any NES game. They're called Jaders. I had to look it up so I'd know how to cuss at them. The stages aren't long, but will require some practice to survive, especially the ones with lots of wall jumping and this dastardly enemy placement on the ledges. It can be a real chore, especially if you get to the boss and die and have to redo it all over. The story to the game isn't strong, but it does okay. Gotham citizens are planning the city's 200th year celebration despite all the crime and violence that rule Gotham. Joker plans to ruin the celebration, and you, the Caped Crusader, set out to ruin Joker's plans. Basic enough. There are cutscenes after each boss battle that tie it all together nicely. You'll fight through Gotham City itself, a chemical factory, an underground conduit, and a shoddy laboratory before finally ascending the cathedral to face off against the big bad Joker. Joker is a really tough boss, and among those people claim is the toughest on any NES game, so you'll want to pack a lunch. My best advice is to be aggressive and dodge that lightning. The soundtrack to the game is really good too, especially that opening track. That's the stuff. Alright, up next... This one has a number of differences from the previous. First, you'll notice the Batman sprite is much larger, and he has a slide attack, which comes in handy, especially for bosses. And there's more detail and animation to Batman himself. There's even a subtle flutter to his cape. Batman's attacks apparently shoot from a wrist gun, according to the manual, and will depend on which power-up you grab. You can shoot the power-ups to cycle them, and you can shoot the power-ups instead of the enemies you're shooting at, which can be super annoying. Pick up C for crossbow, N for sonic neutralizer, B for the Batarang, and S for shield star, or essentially a spread shot. The crossbow is always the first in the cycle, and the one you'll probably end up with most often, which is fine, as it feels the most powerful. The others work better in specific areas, but really the crossbow seems to be the way to go. Yes, Batman shoots to kill in both Sunsoft games. Most enemies can be knocked out in only a few hits, but their placement is cruel, and really a lot of this game is cruel. I think it's more difficult than the first Batman, but the stages are shorter, which kinda evens it all out. The boss battles are a little different than the rest of the game, as your life meter transforms into a life ticker, which can make it a little tricky to tell if you're doing well or not in the heat of battle. You'll find yourself glancing down and away from the fight to comprehend all the math and whether you're even being effective. And the bosses are super hard. Be prepared to replay them over and over while honing your strategies. It's sometimes better to repeat the level and arrive at the boss with one of the powered up weapons than to try again with the basic weapon. If you collect 8 of the energy capsules, you get brief invincibility. You turn yellow and shoot a continuous shot. The opportunity is rare in the game, but take advantage of it. There are some stages where Batman flies around and it plays out like a horizontally scrolling shooter, but those stages are super short and probably the easiest stages in the game. The bosses you'll face include Batman series mainstays like, of course, the Joker, and then Ace Ranger, Mind Droid, and, of course, a giant computer and a menacing robotic thing straight out of Contra. I'm not even sure how much of the game aside from Batman and Joker are true to the comics, honestly. If you get tired of dying and retrying, you can press start, which shows you the password to get back to the stage you're on, which is really nice. You don't need to suicide yourself and get a game over to be given a password. Both Sunsoft Batman games only have about 5 to 6 stages each, which should tell you how tough they are to master and eventually beat, but with infinite continues, some practice, and some patience, it can be done. So Sunsoft's run is done. Let's see what Konami does with the Caped Crusader.
I am Batman.
Oh, I'm sorry, with Batman. Batman Returns is a tried-and-true NES-era beat-em-up. The game looks okay. Batman looks like Batman and all, but the perspective is a little weird, as it does in most of these type games. Batman's sprite remains the same size, even as he goes further into the screen. The enemies, however, do look a little dull, like this dude on stilts looks so out of place and lazily designed. The recipe is as you would imagine. Go right and beat up henchmen and thugs. You can punch, do a jump kick, and the slide attack is back. You can block enemy attacks by holding up and A. Like other beat-em-ups, take the Ninja Turtles 3 Manhattan Project for example, you can press A and B together for a super attack, but you lose some life when you do it. Batman's is a spin attack with his cape, but it's best used in a desperate pinch. You can pick up batarangs to throw, but you never really feel like you have enough, so I usually saved mine for bosses. You can also use a grappling hook to find items in stages, but you gotta get lucky when searching for items. The stages here are a little too long, and if you get to the boss and fail, you have to repeat it all over again. It starts to feel like a slog after a while. Thankfully, if you do need a break, there is a password system here. There's some variability with the stages. Some let you ride in the Batmobile, or even the Bat ski boat to mix it up a little, and the game sure does need it after the long, repetitive combat stages. There are 6 total stages, with boss fights against some recognizable foes like Catwoman and the Penguin. They're all pretty tough. In fact, the whole game is kinda tough. You get one life bar that you can replenish with hearts, and you can get a life box that will give you an extra bar, but the enemies and bosses can be tricky to learn. Some areas don't even feel fair, like this guy on the edge of the screen that is impossible to hit without batarangs. Long sections of the game are just slide kick, punch, repeat, and having to do it all over again after failing at a boss really stinks. Well, that does it for the 3 Batman games on the NES. I personally prefer the first one most. It feels like more of a true console game and less like an arcade port compared to the other 2. Batman Returns is a little dull, but is a fine beat-em-up on a system that doesn't feature a ton of them. All 3 present a steep challenge but are worthy of your attention if you're a Batman and NES fan. If you want more from these titles, you can try their other console ports. Batman the video game and Return of the Joker have Game Boy editions that are largely different games than the ones on the NES. Return of the Joker has a Revenge of the Joker port on the Sega Genesis that was also going to come out on the Super Nintendo, but was cancelled. Batman Returns came to plenty of other consoles in the day, including the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. The games are completely different, and the SNES version is essentially an upgrade of the NES game, and the Genesis version is a platformer more akin to the first NES title. Well, that's all for this time. Bat, thanks for bat watching.
I am Batman. 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 Am I Batman?